Hello guys, in today's video I'm going to go over a few controller settings that I like to use, and perhaps you may gain something from it or not. Who knows, you'll just have to let me know at the end of the video. I'm going to keep this as short and simple as possible, and the main focus will be on my button layout. I won't be covering any of the other settings as nothing has changed since launch except for my FOV, which is set to horizontal 90. So for those of you who want a complete setting guide with a bit more detail, I'll leave a link to my previous one in the description box down below. So then, the first button we're going to have a look at is the interact key. As default, this is set to square on PS4 and X on Xbox, but I've decided to reassign it to L3, which is the same on Xbox. You're probably wondering why and whether it's really worth doing, so I'm going to try and explain the pros and cons of making such change. The main problem with the default button layout is that the interact button, which is assigned to square, overlaps with reload, which is also assigned to square. This means that every time you decide to interact with something, you end up reloading. For example, let's say you're running low on ammo and you resupply at a resupply station. Every time you do this without a full magazine, even as little as one bullet short, you'll be put into a reload animation. Some of you guys may say, well, it's an ammo station, I expect to reload whenever I interact with one. And you're not wrong. When you're completely empty or inside your own spawn and it's safe to do so, a 3-second reload animation isn't going to hurt. But what if there were multiple enemies around you and the ammo station is located at the center of a flag? All of a sudden, the forced reload animation leaves you exposed for 3 or more seconds depending on the weapon you're carrying, and as a result, you're more likely to die mid-reload. Here's another example. Let's say you're low in health but you've got maximum ammo bar 1 and all you want to do is grab a med pack from a resupply station. Guess what? You'll be put into a reload animation even when you're trying to grab health. As you all know, resupply stations are always located around objectives and there's always an enemy lurking around somewhere. Again, this leaves you open to attack and in fact got me killed loads of times when I used to use the default buttons. Most of us can live with being forced to reload at an ammo station as you're more than likely to be empty, but having to do it every time you grab health doesn't seem right. But that's not all. Here's another example. Let's say you've got an enemy on the other side of this door and you want to open it in order to take him or her out. If you happen to have anything less than a full magazine, well, you know what happens next. You'll be put into a reload animation and then the other player just has a field day with you. The only way to bypass the forced reload is to have a full magazine or to sprint through the door and make a lot of noise while doing so. Even if there isn't another player on the other side of the door, having to reload every single time you open one is not only costly but really annoying. I'd be interested to know how many players have died reloading at a resupply station or near a door. I can bet you that there are millions, but I guess we'll never really know. Another problem that used to happen with default buttons but is now fixed is that when reviving you would accidentally swap weapons with the player you were trying to revive. Yes, you could have always prevented this from happening by just pressing square once, but to be honest, we all have the tendency to spam square when we don't succeed at first, especially in risky situations. Again, this all happens because of the two buttons overlapping, and the best fix is to change your interact button, and that's what I've done. The benefit of doing so means you'll eliminate the weapon swap issue when reviving in a matter of seconds, because switching weapons is assigned to reload rather than interact. The other benefit I've alluded to is that you'll never be forced into a reload animation whenever you decide to interact with something. It won't happen again when opening a door or when interacting with one of the two resupply stations. This ultimately results in 3 seconds less exposure every time you interact, and if you add that time up across all of your games, well, you can do the maths. And check this out, let's say you're completely out of ammo and resupply with the new button layout, you'll still get the essential auto reload, which means you won't need to press the reload button separately after picking up the ammo. So you get the best of both worlds and is really one of the main reasons why I've reassigned my interact button. Another positive is, let's say someone throws a grenade in your direction and you try to run away. Now that sprint is binded to interact, you'll automatically chuck the grenade back as you run away. Nothing special, but it will slightly reduce grenade deaths in the long run, even if it's a little. So those are the benefits of reassigning interact to L3, but there is one major downside. The interact button still overlaps with sprint, and this means if a down squad member is right under your feet and you try to sprint away, well, you'll end up reviving instead of sprinting. At times this can be costly if it's unsafe to do so and will lead to your death. This of course happens a lot more often when you're playing as a medic, but I've just learned to avoid unintentional revives by timing my sprint a bit better. The only other issue I had, which is now fixed on console but not on PC, is doors. You may have seen this happen to me in my previous videos, and what happens is whenever you press sprint in front of an open door, the interact key will simultaneously close the door, so you'll end up slamming the door on yourself if you don't time your sprint correctly. A meter or so out is perfect, and if you really get the timing right, you can slam the door behind you as you run. Like I said, it's fixed on console, but because the doors work differently on PC, you may run into that problem if you're using a controller. So those are the downsides of reassigning your interact button. If I had a custom controller with the extra triggers on the back, I would definitely reassign them to one of those to prevent any of the downsides from happening. Unfortunately though, I'm stuck with a standard controller and don't have any spare buttons. I've learned to get used to it over the past year, and if I'm being really honest, it's not perfect. I would much more prefer it if DICE made a change on their end, perhaps limiting the auto reload when interacting with an ammo threshold. So let's say if you're above a certain threshold like 30%, then you won't auto reload, and if you're under, it will. Who knows, there might be a better way to fix this issue, and if you got an idea, do let us know in the comments down below. Anyways, let's move on to the next button. I went and switched bandages with danger ping, and the reason for that is with the current default settings, you can't run and heal at the same time due to where the button is located. Swapping heals to R1 on PS4 and RB on Xbox will let you do so, and it will definitely help you stay alive in moments where you wouldn't have if you hadn't made the change. Also, without the BF1 spotting mechanics, having combo rows relocated to the D-pad is not a big deal. Just remember to press the left D-pad and L1 whenever you want to call in a reinforcement. The only other change I made is binding steady scope to L2, and that translates to LT on Xbox. I've already mentioned this in my previous settings guide, and it's just really helpful with sniping. Something I used to benefit from a lot in Battlefield 1, but as most of you guys are aware, all my sniping is now done on PC. And lastly, I want to briefly inform you about the sliding issue that you may or may not have experienced. The last patch left some players unable to slide, specifically players who use the alternate button layout. To fix this, change your soldier button layout to custom, then press triangle or Y, and then manually assign the slide button from there. DICE are aware of the issue and will probably fix it in the next patch or two, but you're probably better off doing it yourself. Also, they've added a new slide setting on the controls that gives you the option to turn off double tap to slide. If you prefer the Battlefield 1 way of sliding, then you may want to turn this off. And I believe that's all I have to say for today. I hope this guide has helped you, and if you have any questions, leave them down below. As always, feel free to leave a rating, and I'll see you later. Take care.